Hello there, welcome to my channel. This is the continuation of the review series of the Note Air 5C. In the first episode, we looked at the hardware, and this episode we'll look at the software. Now, I do want to say that a year ago, I did a video series on the Note Air 4C, the predecessor to this device, and I did a very extensive visual tour of that device, almost 2 hours worth of material. And pretty much everything I filmed then is relevant to this device as well. So instead of repeating what I did then, I'm just providing the links to those videos into the description of this video. And this video will focus on what's changed, or at least the major changes that took place from those videos to now. So this is an incremental visual tour filling in the gaps that have been created based on all the updates that Boox has done since the release of the Note Air 4C. This has also got chapters in it, even though it's not as long of a video, and hopefully it gives a good idea of the latest improvements into the software since the 4C was released. I should point out that these are not only germane to the 5C, which is the device that's actually being reviewed and filmed in this video, but the same software update is also available for the 4C. So they're actually identical, the two models, in terms of their software that they're running currently. So this video is both where the 5C is at upon release and what changes have been made to the 4C since that device was released. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, there's chapters in this video as well, so you can just jump to the categories that you want, but let's go ahead and dive right on in. One of the key system changes to the new firmware is concerning front lighting. And if I go ahead and swipe down, you can see that we still have the slider bars as we've had before, the first one being the brightness and the second one being the temperature. But in addition to that, we also have 3 presets plus off that are available to us. One's called bright, one's called soft, and the other is called custom. But the reality is actually all 3 are customizable. So for example, if I go over here to soft and I don't really like this, I want to make this, halfway on, or we'll go to 20 in terms of brightness, and we'll go to 20 in terms of the temperature, like so. Then if I go to custom and I go back to soft, it will go back to whatever those settings were the last I used it. So you can actually customize all 3 of these to whatever it is that you want. And then of course the off button completely turns off front lighting. In addition to that, there's this little ellipsis over here. If you click on this, it gives you the option of whether you want to automatically turn on front light when you wake up the device. So just a nice ability to kind of create your own 3 presets with the lighting that you want in different circumstances. And then instead of having to adjust the slides accordingly, you just click on one of those macros and that gives you the lighting that you're looking for. One of the notable changes to the system settings in the new 4.1 version of the software is the change from the e-ink center to what they call Einkwise. And let's go ahead and take a look at that. There is the macro button there, so that'll take us right into those settings. And essentially what they've done is they've simplified the interface for the changes that you can make to the refresh settings of the device. Now, a few things to note about that. First off, normally in the past, they presented you with 4 or 5 different options. You'd have an HD and a Regal, you'd have a speed, a fast and ultra fast, something like that. So they've mostly simplified that to 2 selections in most cases. And sometimes it'll be HD, sometimes it'll be Regal, and then you'll have kind of a speed option available. So basically reducing from 4 to 5 to 2 options to kind of simplify things. In addition to that, they've left all the same configuration options that were available before, but now they're buried within the UI. So for example, if I wanted to go into the color mode and play with that, I can click on the custom icon twice and those are the options there. And if I want to go into the layout, if that was available, that's available not in the system settings, but it's available in an app. So let's go ahead and open up, say, the Google Play Store. Like so. And we'll just leave that there for now. And if you go into the Einkwise, then now you've got your DPI settings. So all the most popular settings are available here. You do have recommended if you don't want to mess around with your settings, but if you want to go deeper, you can. And you'll notice that when you select that, you do have the ability to change some of those settings as well. So all the same functionality is there from before, but they've simplified the interface so it's a little bit easier to engage. And for people that just want to pick between two very different options, you can do that and then move forward accordingly. And of course, this will save those settings per app, per the system. All those will be saved separately so that you can have the right refresh setting for the right application. So that hasn't changed. But what has changed is the interface has become simpler, and they've raised to the forefront the most important decisions like the two key refresh modes, your high contrast, and your DPI settings are all there for immediate selection, and you have to dig deeper if you really want to get into the nuances and the subtle refinements of the refresh settings. Here we are in the Notes app, and they did make an addition of two other pen styles. I'm going to go ahead and click on this to show this. And that is the calligraphy pen and the fountain pen. That's all underneath what previously had just been the pen. So as we'll see in a second, you now see these two other options when you select the pen icon. This is basically what it looks like at different line lengths for each. Let's go ahead and click on this shortcut button, and then you can see that if we have pen selected, then there's these new options for both calligraphy as well as for fountain pen. And this little line over here shows what the impact is, particularly of the thickness of the line. So if I drop that down, let's go ahead and drop like so, then the line changes accordingly. So it gives you a little bit of demonstration of what to expect when you select that pen type and that thickness. Everything else is identical. You have the same selection of colors as before. It's just these two new pen styles that have been added to the mix. One of the great features that Boox introduced a year ago was lasso recognition. And as a reminder, the way that you make sure that's active is you go to this AI button over here, and you make sure that lasso recognition is set to on, as is the case here. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to circle any selection, and then you can bring up basically a lasso menu as a result. What's changed in the latest update is a couple things. It used to be that you would circle something and then the menu would update here at the top bar, and now that menu actually pops up just above your selection. Let's go ahead and show that in action. Okay, there we go. But the second change that Boox had is they made sure that the delete icon was readily available. Previously, depending on your view, it was hidden in a More tab. And here, it's right out in the open. What's nice about that is that if you wanted to just do a quick circle erase, you can circle what you want and then click on the delete button. This is nice because their other AI feature, which is their scribble to erase, really is kind of a limited feature, and it can leave relics. So I never found that to be a useful way to quickly delete things. But now that they've changed how the lasso recognition works, that actually substitutes as a better selection erase tool. And what's nice about that is you don't have to go away from your pen icon. So we'll go ahead and draw this, do lasso erase, and then delete, and then I can go on and keep writing again. So it's a nice way of incorporating better flow into the Boox device. Boox has always had the ability to collapse the UI in the Notes application. And you can see by default, the UI covers both the left side as well as the top. So it does cover some of the canvas. If you click on this icon in the upper left screen, and this particular icon is new, but the functionality was always there, it collapses it down into this floating toolbar. And you can then take this floating toolbar and you can move it around like so. Oops. Wherever you'd like to have it. So it's highly customizable in that regard. But what's new under the 4.1 is that you have these tool sets. So if I click on this star, there are 3 by default. So here's the sketch toolbox, which you can see here. You can go to notes, which is slightly different. And then you can go into journal, which looks like that. But probably more importantly is that you can simply create your own. So if I click on this plus icon, I have the option to go ahead and name mine. I'll just call it Moss. We'll create it, and then we'll go ahead and click on this edit icon to basically determine what we want in the toolbar. Now, most of the things you have up here are there by default. I think it's only the erase button that can go away. If I try to get rid of any of the others, it won't allow that. So that has to be there by default. But everything down below can be selected. So if I want layers in there, if I want AI in there, I can add those in accordingly. And let's go ahead and go back out and make sure that we select that set, like so. And there it is. Now, in addition to that, I can also go in and edit the size. So I can make this really tiny. Like so. Or I can make it really large, assuming that I can select it. And it would look like that. So a highly customizable toolbar that's available to you. You can manage your toolbars by clicking on this little check icon, and here you can delete or rename accordingly. Now, if I want to get out of this, I can select the icon, and then it gives me a few options. One is I can completely collapse the toolbar where there's just kind of a side tag, or I can completely hide the toolbar, or I can return back to where I was by selecting that. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the toolbar and show one last thing, which is if you swipe in from either the left or the right side, you can make the toolbar disappear like so, and then you have the complete canvas at your disposal, and then swiping again will cause that to return. So a highly customizable feature and a new feature, or a modification, probably more accurately, to the Boox Note software. So a new note type created in version 4.1 of the Boox software is an infinite note. So previously you had the ability to expand your canvas, so not just what you saw on the screen, but you could go over basically one screen and one down to create a 2x2 grid. Now you can actually go infinitely. Now there are practical limitations to that, but I couldn't find any technical limitations to how far you could go. So it is effectively infinite, and certainly probably more than anyone needs. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to go ahead and create here, and there is the option to create an infinite note, which I'll select. Now, in infinite notes, you basically have a much more limited selection of templates. And this is because the template needs to be able to stretch as the canvas stretches. So that makes sense. I can go ahead and go with a grid. Let's go with a small grid, which will basically just make the grids nice and tiny. And we can, of course, name it. We'll just leave that with the default name. And let's go ahead and create that. Now I can take my two fingers and I can scroll. Let's go ahead and put a marker in here, like so. And then I can take my two fingers and then scroll that along, and then you can see in the preview template where you are in the document. Let's go ahead and create another marker here, and then we can scroll. And you can see it's gotten bigger now that I've written on the edge. Let's go ahead and write a C here. We'll take our two fingers, and now it's even bigger. And the same property would be true going down below. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way down, like so. And so now I can go even further down and further over to the side. Now, obviously, one of the things you introduce when you have this in place is you've got this massive canvas that's much harder to navigate. Yes, I can take my two fingers, but you probably would want a way to be able to quickly zip through what becomes this larger canvas. So there's a way to do that. And the way to do that is to use this pin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to hold it down here and keep it pressed. And then this comes up and you have the ability to select pin. And then you can name it whatever you want. You can go with the default, or you can call this, we'll call this 1. and click OK. And then there's your pin right there. So let's go ahead and scroll away from that pin, like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on this pin icon. And then there is one. I can select on that, and that will quickly take me to that pin. So that's basically how the new Infinite Notes work. And it's pretty nice if you're doing things like your creative writing, you're doing flow diagrams, you're kind of doing mind mapping and those type of activities. Having the ability for the canvas to stretch in whatever direction you want is really nice, and Boox has done a good job of implementing that here. With the 4.1 software, Boox has included some macros for the reading themes within PDFs. So in order to take a look at those, I'm in a PDF. I'm going to tap on the screen, and then down below I have this option to pick style. You'll notice there are a number of presets for each style, and these can be changed. If you tap on them twice, you can go in and change some of the details of each. But let's take a look at what the default does. So right now we're on original. If we click on clear view, then you can see it becomes a little bit bolder and it fills a little bit more of the screen. Scrolling view is one of my favorites. If you click on scrolling view, then instead of paging between pages of the document, you can scroll. So let's get out of this, and you can see how you can scroll the document now instead of having to page through them. It's a very nice addition. You've got dual page view, which goes into landscape mode and just gives you 2 pages. Not necessarily a great view because that compresses the pages, but that is available. And then you can create your own customization option as well. Of course, among all of these, there's all sorts of details underneath them. We'll go ahead and click on the scrolling view. You can see some of the options there. So a lot of detail, but they're trying to simplify things a little bit by giving some presets that you can work with. And if you wanted to, you can drill deeper accordingly. The text selection toolbar, which pops up when you highlight a section of text, is a little bit different than before. They've simplified that slightly. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. Before we do, just a reminder that we do have some tools that are activated here. And in particular, we have the ability to circle to mark or to underline to mark. So I can engage in either of those in order to bring this toolbar up. So I'm going to go ahead and take this header right here. I'm just going to go ahead and circle that, like so. And then it's going to go ahead and highlight the section. So if you're familiar with the previous one, this is a much larger selection with a lot more elements to it, but they simplified it this time around. So now you've got 4 different presets that you can choose from, and all of these can be customized as was the case before. So for example, I can go to this one by clicking on it, but I can click on it again, and then I can change, the font. Here it's white, here's black, here's a blackout, the underline if applicable, and the color. So you can preset these 4 to any combination that you'd like, and you can also use this to clear the selection. Down below, it's streamlined the options. You can copy, you can type in an annotation, you can translate it, you can refer to a dictionary, share it, create a link, go to the AI assistant, or you can customize this view like so. And here are some of the things that you can do. So you can go ahead and move some of this up and down and select what you'd like to see there. So they tried to make that a little bit easier and a little bit more less intimidating by limiting what is available when you make a selection. I have the Note Air 4C here on the left and the new 5C here on the right, and I thought we would try to compare a color template to see if there's any significant changes in color with the new model. I have front lighting on to full cold to let the colors pop as much as possible. And comparing the 2 images, you do see some subtle differences between the 2. For example, you see some of the colors are a little bit darker at the highest levels here on the 4C. If you look at the cyan, for example, that's quite a bit darker than it is here. And same with magenta, that's quite a bit darker than we see over here. You do see a little bit more color accuracy on magenta. You can see that there versus over here, which is a little bit red on the top levels. But by and large, not significant differences between the two screens. It's mostly pretty much in parity with only subtle differences between the two. All right, well, that concludes our update to the visual tour. So now you're up to speed on all the things that the Note Air 5C as well as the 4C can do. If you have any questions about any of that, go ahead and pop those into the description. I'm sure there was probably a feature or two I missed, so if you want me to comment on that, let me know as well. But the next phase of my review series will be into the final review. And this is where I'll have the battery test results. This is where I'll go over all the pros and cons. I'll just talk about how the 5C stacks up to the competition, at least to the extent that we know about it. And then we'll wrap things up with that video. So I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Until then, hope you have a great day.